and hello. Welcome to this March 2018 Get Started with CyVerse webinar. I'm Jason Williams, coming to you from Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, New York. Welcome. Over the next hour, we will give you an introduction to your CyVerse account, the CyVerse platform, and also take you through some initial sets of analyses as demonstrations, live demonstrations of the infrastructure, and answer any questions you might have about the platform, anything that's needed to get you started using your account to the fullest. Before I go into the actual subject matter and content of the webinar, I just want to familiarize you with this Adobe technology that we're using to broadcast. So importantly, we do this live every month because we want to give you an opportunity to ask questions. At the bottom of the screen there, you have the ability to ask any question anytime, so go ahead and chat any questions you have to me, and off screen I can check the answers or see what your questions are. At the top of the screen, there's a little button with 4 arrows on it, and that enables you to make that video full screen. So when I switch to my computer demos, it'll make it a lot easier to see if you go to full screen video at that time. Also, depending on your connection, if you move your mouse over the video, you'll also be presented with a window that allows you to alter the bandwidth. So if you are on a lower connection, you can decrease it from HD. Finally, on the side of the screen, there are some downloads and also some links towards the bottom there that are relevant to you, and you can keep those handy. Other than that, what I first want to do is give you a brief presentation that gives you an overview of CyVerse as a project, and then I'll go into 3 different computer demos about uploading and sharing your data, about doing an analysis through our web interface, and also doing your analysis on the cloud. So let's get started. The vision for CyVerse as a project is what we call transforming science through data-driven discovery. So as a project, we've got more than 40,000 users, petabytes of data, and there have been hundreds of publications and courses and discoveries that have been enabled by the infrastructure that you have access to. The project itself actually began under a different name called the iPlant Collaborative, and that was funded in 2008 with the goal of empowering a new plant biology. The project had a public launch in 2010, and then by 2013, we were renewed with a broader role of mission of delivering cyber infrastructure for life sciences, and we've continued ever since then, including in 2016, a rebranding of sorts where we took up the name CyVerse, just enlarging the scope of our mission to really reach all of the life sciences who are really now depending upon data-driven discovery applications. One really important thing to communicate to our users is that we're funded by the National Science Foundation. So we are your colleagues and your collaborators. It's a $100 million plus investment by NSF, and it's made freely available to you in the community, so you don't pay a direct cost to use any of our products or services. Of course, we do open everything to international users, and we really love it when you cite us. So please take a look at the citations that we suggest when it comes time to publish. Your acknowledgments is how NSF knows its investment is having an impact. Now, I've used the term a couple times, cyber infrastructure, but what is that? Well, in some sense, it's nothing you're not already familiar with. It's data storage, software, high-performance computing, people. These are all things you probably use in your day-to-day workflow. But it's the idea of putting those elements together in a way that really allows you to do science a lot more efficiently, especially when it comes to working with large data sets. So practically speaking, what CyVerse delivers you is platforms, tools, and data sets, storage and compute, training, and support. And that last part is an example of that today in this webinar. Another take-home message is that CyVerse is built for data. Whether you're working with microbes, plants, animals, biomedical, ecological data, or different data types in terms of sequence or images, or whatever the case is, CyVerse is really built for data. And so, in the main, you'll find that we have really the tools and services that you need to accomplish your science. This is a little bit of a diagram that gives you an idea of our products and services. So at the top layer, what we call our products, and these are the things that you as a biologist are more likely to interface with. Everything from the cloud and our web computing discovery environment, both of which we'll get demos of today, to our classroom DNA Subway, which is a tool for bringing bioinformatics into the classroom, working with image data, independent groups who built their own software stack on top of CyVerse, and also the data commons. But beneath the surface, there really are quite a bit of resources, and if you are more on the developer end, then you also have direct access to these. Everything from the data store, which you'll have a demo on, and the tools and technologies that make your data secure and also searchable, to the actual systems, databases, and storage, all of which are accessible to a greater or lesser extent through our APIs. So, what are the community priorities? Well, when you come to CyVerse, really, what we have built is what you've asked us to build. So you'll find that there are already tools from everything from de novo assembly of genomes to RNA-seq, working with GWAS data, really the whole gamut of the sequence-based bioinformatics applications, in addition to image data and some other data types. But the consistent genomic priorities really are the big drivers. So working with sequence data is what many of us are doing. Almost more than 95% of scientists, biologists are working with some large data set from RNA-seq to ChIP-seq, etc. And you'll find that those tools are really already there and ready for you to use in CyVerse. And if they're not there, we can make it really easy for you to get what you need. Another thing that we want to also acknowledge as we get to the end of this sort of historical presentation, but it's good information if you know its background, is that CyVerse is made up of multiple institutions. So the majority of folks are at University of Arizona. Then we also have a number of folks down at Texas Advanced Computing Center, which is part of UT Austin. I am here, as long as others in the science domains, at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, and we also have collaboration down at UNC Wilmington. There's also separately funded CyVerse UK currently, which is in the UK and is funded by BBSRC and is a collaboration of various institutions and colleges. Okay, so let's transition to talking about what are the things that actually come with your account and how can you make use of them. One of the metaphors that we use sometimes are Lego blocks, and so what we built allows you to take those pieces and really assemble them to your custom endpoint. The first up is the data store. So with the data store, you have all the resources you need to share and manage data with your lab colleagues and communities. You have, as an individual user, an initial 100 gigabyte allocation, but if you need more, a terabyte is also available. Just need to give us some justification if you want several terabytes of data. The data are automatically backed up, and we make it really easy to upload, download, and share. And I'll show you those features to some extent in just a few moments. The discovery environment is a platform, a web-based platform that allows you to run almost any bioinformatics application that you would run in the command line, except that you can use it through an easy-to-use graphical user interface. It's integrated with our data store and with high-performance computing, and it is extensible, so you can add your own applications. Atmosphere is cloud computing for the life sciences. If you haven't used the cloud, we'll try to convince you of some of the great reasons why, and also give you a demo of what you have access to on Atmosphere. If you are a developer, then the science APIs are of interest to you because it allows you to fully customize how you consume our resources. If you teach, I'm really a big fan of, and we help develop DNA Subway, which is a graphical user interface to several bioinformatics pipelines, all streamlined and made classroom friendly. If you work with image data, BISC handles several hundred image data types from microscopic to macroscopic and allows you to do secure image storage, analysis, and data management. Okay, so that was sort of the background, a really sort of whirlwind in just a few minutes, under 10 minutes, giving you a little bit of an idea of the context of the project. Really, most users come to us using just a small set of the resources, and then as your needs grow or as you become more familiar, you can branch out and really use what you need. What I'm going to do now is transition to several demos where I'm going to use my computer to show you how to get started with this. My recommendation is this. This entire broadcast will be posted to YouTube after, so we are recording. So if I go at a pace and you need to catch up, you'll have a chance to consult the video later. The other recommendation is at the bottom of the screen, as I mentioned, that you have the ability to chat questions at any time, and I'll certainly look off screen to be able to check on those questions. And finally, as I mentioned, there's a little button up there in the corner on your video with 4 little arrows in it. If you click that, you can make the video full screen, and that'll be helpful because I'm going to be doing these things on my own computer in just a moment. Okay, so let's talk about getting data into CyVerse. As I mentioned, the CyVerse data store allows you to store, share, and analyze any type of data that's related to research. You can move those data seamlessly between CyVerse platforms, you can automate transfers, and you can share with lab members, collaborators, and communities. There are 3 basic ways to access the data store depending upon your use and comfort level. CyberDuck, which is a standalone program, which makes the data store a bit like Dropbox. We have the discovery environment, which is our online web point and click. And if you're comfortable with the command line, you also have that as an access point too, and I'll show all of those in just a moment. There are some advantages to each one of these platforms. So for the discovery environment, it's really easy to share data, although since it is web-based, there are some speed limitations, and so we'll get around that with CyberDuck in a moment. CyberDuck is really what I recommend most people use, especially for the first time when you want to transfer a large data set up to CyVerse. We'd expect that you are able to drag and drop your way to doing that in just a few moments. It takes less than 5 minutes to set up on your own computer. And then you can transfer, I'd say, about 100 gigabytes in under 30 minutes if you're on a good connection. And with iCommands, which is our command line implementation, you have full access to all of the transfer methods, sharing methods, etc. at the command line, and it's really customizable. Okay, so let me just give you a demo of those things. First, let me go ahead and bring up the CyVerse Learning Center, and on your Adobe Connect, you also have a link to the data store guide on the right-hand side of your screen. So this is the new CyVerse Learning Center, which is at learning.cyverse.org. Right now, I'm just going to click on these data store guide as a matter of reference. This is still in beta, so not all the materials are up here yet, but certainly enough to do what we need to do. And I just reference these materials because they're available to you. Even though I am not going to be using them directly now, I want you to know they're there so that you can follow up as you need. And of course, you can contact me at any time or CyVerse support. So the first thing we're doing is the CyVerse using CyberDuck, which is a separate third-party software tool. So the very first time you use it, you'll just find these downloads and then follow these first steps to actually configure it. And really, it's only 5 instructions here, 2 of which are just telling you how to download what you need. Once you download CyberDuck and install on your computer, I've already got it running. So here's my CyberDuck tool. And let me just open up a new window, a new browser. When you first configure it, it'll just have a link here, stored link to your data store, and you'll double click that. And then after doing that, sorry, I can't make this particular screen bigger, but what I see here are all the files and folders that are currently in my CyVerse data store. So if I want to take any of these and move them, let's take a file. It's really as simple as dragging that onto my desktop, and then a separate window will open, giving me the chance to see the progress of that download or upload. It may ask me, if I want to clean things up, my history, but essentially it's a drag and drop system. And the reverse is true. If I had a file or a folder that was on my computer, all I need to do to upload that to CyVerse Data Store is drag that over into the left-hand side, either into my home folder or into any one of the existing folders that I have there. Really, it's that simple. There's really nothing else more for me to show you. Then once you download CyberDuck, and again, you'll go to the learning.cyverse.org and follow the data store guide. It's also linked for you in the Adobe Connect room. It's the last link, data store guide. You'll be able to go there, download CyberDuck, download the configuration profile, which is simply a bookmark, and then you'll have the option to enter your username, and that will connect you. There are some additional warnings and recommendations for uploading data, but besides that, it really is a drag and drop system. Okay, and that download is completed. I'm on Wi-Fi, so it takes a moment to initialize. The next thing I'm going to show you is something called iCommands, which is the command line version. If you don't use the command line, I really recommend you learn, but I won't spend long here, so we'll be back on the web and point and click in just a moment if that's not something you use day to day. I'll also remind you that the Learning Center also has all of these instructions and iCommands, and so the very first time you'll use iCommand, which is available for Mac and Linux, and you can download it and configure it. It'll take, again, under 5 minutes. I've already got it running on my machine, so let me just start a terminal here that's a little bit easier to see. And this is my terminal. And this I can make a little bit bigger for those watching on the screen. And if you're familiar with the language of the command line, if I want to list the contents of a directory, it's ls, but I'm going to do an ILS, and what I'll get back is the contents of my directories on the CyVerse data store. And if I wanted to download one of these folders, let's try this time, I could do what's called an iget command. I want to be recursive since I'm downloading a folder, give me the progress report and be verbose. And I want to download the VCFs folder, and I want to download to my desktop on my machine. What I'll see here is a status of that download and what's going on, and it's complete. And on my desktop here on the screen, I've downloaded those folders. So again, really, if you're familiar with the command line, it'll take you under 5 minutes to configure it, and you can just go ahead and use it as is. Let me return now to using the data store using a web interface, and for that, I'm going to go to the CyVerse homepage. So this is CyVerse.org, and there's a convenient way for us to get to some of the products. So if you click on Analyze at CyVerse.org, you'll see links to all of the CyVerse platforms, and I'm going to go ahead and click on Launch the Discovery Environment. Now, I already happen to be logged in to the Discovery Environment, and this is it if you've never logged in before. I'll tell you a little bit more about the Discovery Environment later, but it's essentially a virtual desktop that you just access with your web browser. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Data, and when I do, a window opens, and this allows me to see the contents of my CyVerse data store. I click on my home directory, which is just my CyVerse username, and here I see all those things that I saw both in CyberDuck and also that I saw in iCommands. Now, if I want to do anything, let's say I want to share a file, I'm going to click on this BAM file, and I might want to share that. Let me show you some easy ways to share files. And this first way that I'm going to show you is called creating a public link. This, again, is on the CyVerse data store, or rather on the Learning Center. This is under the Discovery Environment Guide, where there's a whole section. Oops, let me go back to it. There was a whole section. I'm trying to find out where. There we go. Somehow it didn't go to the place I was expecting to be. There is a whole section on sharing your data in the Discovery Environment. So let me search for it because there we go. There we go. For some reason, it was not showing up. In any case, Mail was under Other. Okay. This is calling a public link. So again, I just want to remind you the documentation is here, but I'm just going to show you how it works. So if I select a file, and this only works with files, it will not work with folders, I go up to Share and say Create a public link. There's the file that I want to create a link on, so I click Create. And it gives me this URL, which I could share. And whoever I share it with does not have to have a CyVerse account. It's really just a very quick and simple way to share a file. So I'm going to go ahead and I want to actually show that link, make it easy for me to copy. In fact, I can click Copy a Clipboard. And then if I go to a web browser and enter that URL and click Enter, it's going to open a dialog box asking me to download that file. Okay? And you could give this to anybody. I'm not going to download that, so I'll cancel. Now, let's say you don't want that link to exist anymore, they've downloaded it. I can click the little delete button, and that link will be deleted. And now if they try to download it, it'll say that it doesn't exist. Okay? So let me remind you again, the restrictions on this. So you click a file, you go up to Share and Create Public Link. I would suggest that you don't share really large files in this way, because it's done over the internet. So that's a regular HTTP protocol, and sharing, let's say, a couple of gigs of data could be quite slow. CyberDuck will be much faster, and the next one I'm going to show you is going to be much faster. But for individual files, you can show that. But what if you want to share bigger files or even folders that are collections of files? Well, let's look at this next method. Now, this next method does require someone to have a CyVerse account. So in this case, let's assume that whoever you're sharing with is signed up for a free account. And I can click on a folder that I would like to share. And this time I go up to share and say, share with collaborators. Okay. Now I need to enter the name of the person I'd like to share with. So I'm just going to go ahead and type in the name. And their name will come up as well as their affiliation, so I can select that. At this point, I have the opportunity to select how I want to share it with them and with what level of permission. Now, back on the guide there is a link that explains what each of those permission levels are. Read is the lowest level of permission, so they can essentially read and download that file. And own, they can do everything including delete it. So you want to be selective about how you share that data. However, once I'm ready to share that file or folder with them, I can click done, and then I'll get a message at the top that that request has been received and that it will be shared with that person really instantaneously. And it doesn't matter what the size of that folder is. They get it access in just a few moments. They also get a notification that something has been shared with them. Now let's say I want to undo that. I can click that again and go to share and say share with collaborators, and I'll see that person's name. But if I click the X and then click done, it'll revoke permission, and then within a few seconds they won't have access to that data. Okay, and I also get a notification. So that's the basics for sharing files and folders in that way. There are a whole bunch of other data features. One that I will just take a second to show you, and this is referenced, is the metadata. I'm just going to go ahead and open an example. But you have the ability, let's go to here. You have the ability to share files or folders and to associate files and folders with metadata. I actually want to do it this way. Let's see. This one. So as you know, you can only put so many underscores in a file name before things get really hard to interpret. But what you can do for any given file or folder is you can attach metadata to it. So in this case, I know there's metadata, so if I want to view the metadata, you have the ability to arbitrarily add metadata fields with their own attributes, values, and units to describe a file. And then it makes it very searchable and sortable. In this case, this metadata that's been assigned is, I don't want to change it because this is exactly the metadata that is needed for a submission pipeline for the SRA, the NCBI Sequence Read Archive. Besides adding your own metadata template or using your own arbitrary metadata, which you can do, we have a variety of metadata templates. So again, you could click on, for example, download template, and it would give you downloads to spreadsheets for existing templates, which you could fill in and then associate. I don't have time, unfortunately, to show that in this demo, but I want you to know that there really are some other cool data features that are worth looking through the documentation at. Okay, so what I've showed you so far is how to use CyberDuck in order to drag and drop files and move those to or from the CyVerse data store. I've also demonstrated very quickly how you can do that at the command line. And with a discovery environment, what I've shown you is that once you have data within the CyVerse data store, you can actually arbitrarily share that data. So for example, if you have a lab, you might have your account as the PI, let's assume, or as an investigator, and then you may share with your postdocs and grad students, okay, you have access to these folders, make sure your analyses are in those, and you really start creating a data ecosystem for your lab, which is fairly manageable, permission controlled, and also annotated with metadata. So it's a stellar set of features worth looking into, and those are some of the first steps. But now let's talk about when it comes time to analyze the data. We're also going to do this in the discovery environment, but first I have a few slides. So let me just come back here and pull those up to orient us. We did the demo here with iCommands, and now let's talk about the discovery environment in just a little bit more detail before we return to it. So the discovery environment is a platform, and you can use it to run almost any bioinformatics application. It's integrated with data high-performance computing, and it's user extensible in that you can add your own applications. We've just seen the data window where you can upload, download files and folders. You can share via URL. You can share files or folders. Now we're going to turn to apps, where you can see a collection of the applications that are available. We're not going to have time to build a workflow, but there are tools there for that, or modify apps. Again, we won't have time for that, but it exists. Analyses is where we can monitor the status of a job, find results, cancel relaunch jobs, and also get a detailed job history. So we're going to do a demo here again, and in this demo we're just going to take some unaligned DNA sequences in FASTA format and create a multiple sequence alignment. So fairly simple analysis, but it gets you using the discovery environment. So here we are back on the discovery environment, and it's worth now pointing out some additional features. On the upper right hand side, you kind of already see notifications. So as things happen, data shared, analyses submitted or complete, you'll have a record of that in your notifications. In the little person icon, you can manage preferences. For example, do you want to get an email when analysis is complete? Other sorts of things are all there. You can have a list of collaborations, linked to some documentation. One important feature we also provide is in the lower right hand side, which is the intercom. This is the live chat that you can open. So if you are having an issue or need help with anything, you can start a new conversation, and either someone will respond right away, or depending on the hours, they'll get back to you via email, and you can resume that conversation. So I'm not going to use that now, but I'm just going to click on that. So let's do our analysis. First, I said we had some data, and I'm going to go ahead and look at the data. Let's see if I have this here. Oops, I want in community data. And I've just got some FASTA files that we're going to take a look at. So I believe this is in platform guides, discovery environment, and we've got Muscle, which is the app that we're going to use in just a moment. And our input for this is some sample plants. So DE sample plants, which are, if this is correct, unaligned plant sequences in FASTA format. Okay, so there are samples. That's the input for our analysis. Now we need to choose an application. So we click on Apps, and what we will be presented with are a listing of all the applications that are currently available in the discovery environment. First, my apps are just things that I've worked on personally to build, but you may want to click on Topic or Operation. If you click on something like Analysis and Sequence Alignment and Multiple Sequence Alignment, eventually we'd probably find Muscle as one of the options there. But the other way to do that is just to search for the Muscle app. And once I do that, I know that I happen to want to use this Muscle 3.8.31. All the applications look like this. If I click these three dots, I can get some additional information like the app info. And I can see some details on the application. So if I wasn't sure what it is and where the user manual is, I'd be able to get that there. Okay. The other thing is I could go ahead from here and make the application a favorite. I can see if it has a community rating. But right now I just want to use the application, so I click on the name, it'll open the application. Now all of the applications in the discovery environment look like this. They are this sort of accordion menu of different things that you may have to traverse in order to satisfy the needs of the analysis. So we're going to go ahead, I'm just going to label the name of this analysis demo. Oops, and I'm going to say in my comments, this is a demo for the March 2018 webinar. I'm going to leave the output folder as analyses, which is by default. And in select input data, I need to browse to the data file that I want to input. So in this case, it's in community data and CyVerse training, platform, discovery environment, and Muscle input. Okay, so I've selected that. And then this is also required. It's got the asterisk, and I know that that happens to be DNA. Once I've gone through the menus and I filled out everything, I can click Launch Analysis. And at the top of the screen, I'll get a notification that things are launched, and I'll also get some notifications as it progresses through the process of working on that analysis. Now, I'll mention here that when you launch an analysis on the discovery environment, it's not dependent upon your local computer. So I can, for one, I can close my laptop and that will continue running into completion, and also everything that's happening is remote. So I don't have to worry about configuring how much memory, how many processors. Those things are, for the most part, automatically set. The only exception are some of our HPC applications, which may either have some direct control, where you can alter some of those parameters, but that is, again, another webinar. But we do want to see what's going on, so let's go back and look at the Analysis button. So if I click on Analysis panel, I'll be able to see history and the status of anything that's happening. So right now, there's my muscle job at the top, which is listed as running, but I could see any other job that I've launched previously. If I want to click on a previously launched job, or let's click on this one that we've launched so far, and I go up to Analyses and say View Parameters, I can actually see some details about that job, much more than it's just running. One, there's a link directly to the file that was the input, so if I wasn't sure or the file name was cryptic, I could click on it and actually access that file. And then I also see all the different options. For example, the sequence type, I selected DNA. On a more sophisticated app, or at least sophisticated in terms of the number of options that are there, I'm just scrolling through, and as I scroll back, let's say a top hat job has a lot more options, view parameters, and you can see everything is there. I could also save this, for example, as a text file, so I have a record of my analyses, which is really important for reproducibility. The other thing is that if I want to relaunch or redo that same job, but maybe let's say I want to make a few tweaks, I can go to Analyses and click on Relaunch. And rather than, in the case of this top hat job, selecting every single thing and doing it all over again just so that I can change the minimum intron length to 100, really it will launch with everything just as I used it the last time. So it gives me that flexibility without having to type everything again or click lots of buttons. All right, so as we saw, or actually I need to go back to the top here. So I'm just going to click on refresh because I saw my notification that that muscle job had finished. Okay, oops, I want to go back up to the top. Okay, here's a muscle job. It's listed as completed. So to actually go to that job, if I click on the name of it, it'll navigate to the place in the data store where that output is stored. And I can click on one of the output files, in this case a file up interleaved.aln file, which should be the aligned sequences. Okay, so that was a relatively simple application, but essentially all of the apps are in that same type of format, the same type of interfacing. So any app that you might have used at the command line or could use at the command line in principle can be used in the discovery environment and allow you to point and click. The computation is all remote, so it happens without you need to worry about how it's happening or where it's happening, and those jobs will run to completion. It's linked up with your own personal data store, so you can upload, use any of those apps, and there are plenty of places to get the help that you need, including the documentation, everything down to the live chat. So that concludes this particular demo, but I'll remind you, at the bottom of the screen, you have the ability to chat any questions you have. So as you do have questions, please let me know. But I will now move on to the final demo that we're going to do live. All right, so again, have a couple of slides to orient us, so I'll go back to the PowerPoint presentation. Okay, so we've done the discovery environment demo, and we have analyzed or done that multiple sequence alignment. Now let's talk about Atmosphere. So Atmosphere is cloud computing, and maybe you haven't used that to analyze data, but it's extremely powerful, and let me show you why. You have access to hundreds of virtual machine images. You can fully customize your software setup, and again, it's integrated with our computing and data resources. But first, let me explain some of the terminology or the jargon that's necessary for you to understand if you are unfamiliar. Two concepts I want you to know. One is something called an image, and the other thing is called an instance. But let's explain what an image is by drawing an analogy. I think most of us have had a computer and needed to move data onto that new computer. And that new computer, not only do you move your data onto it, but you need to set it up and you need to install it, and etc., to get it somewhere reasonably back to the things that you needed on your old computer. But when you take that original computer and you want to move files or folders, most often you take them and you copy them onto a backup hard drive. However, rather than taking individual files or folders, there's a different type of file that you could make called an image file. And an image file is a complete clone of that original system. The operating system, all the installed software and those settings and parameters and dependencies, as well as any data sets. And so on the new system, what comes off of that hard drive is the individual copied files, but what comes from an image file is actually a complete clone of that original system. So an image file is a complete clone. The operating system, everything installed, you wouldn't have to take a clone system made from an image file. You wouldn't have to reinstall any software. It would be just like using the old computer, except on new hardware. So that's what an image is. The second concept is something called an instance. So in the CyVerse cloud, we physically have resources, hard disks, CPUs, RAM memory, which is redundant now that I say it, you have RAM. But you are asking us for, when you come to use the Atmosphere cloud, for a certain amount of that, a certain allocation. And you also, in order to build a computer, need an operating system and software, and so you also select an image. When you put those physical resources and the image together, what you come up with is something called an instance or virtual machine. And this is a remote computer that's really made for you within the course of 10 to 15 minutes, and it's available for you to access at your own IP address that we provide to you. So how does it work? Well, first, some features. You can choose an existing image that we provide, or you can customize one of our more blank images, or even existing image that has almost everything you need. You can customize that. We provide up to 16 core 128 gig machines. You can access it via the shell, or if it has a desktop, using something called VNC. And you can also share your image with selected users or make them public. There are lots of reasons to use it, but essentially the reasons to use it are just the reasons for using any computer, except it's almost like buying a new computer without paying anything for it, and you use it for the time you need, and when you don't use it, you put it back. So that allows you to run software and analyze data that are monopolizing your current laptop or desktop. There are some programs that you couldn't run in the discovery environment. Anything that had its own graphical user interface and was dependent on that, you could run those in Atmosphere. You have full administrative access or pseudo access. You can also use uniform computing setups. So I love this in teaching because I know everyone in my workshop has exactly the same computational settings and data sets. And you can also use it if you're making your own software available to the user community and you want to spare them the installation of dependencies. So let's give a quick demo on how to actually launch and connect to this. There are a couple of ways to do this, but I'm going to show you something even easier once I get to Atmosphere. However, standalone programs like VNC Viewer or PuTTY, which is specific to Windows, Mac and Linux, you have the terminal. These are all ways that you can access your virtual machine. So to do that, also from the CyVerse homepage is a link to Atmosphere. When you come to Atmosphere and I'm already logged in, I can see what I've been using or the history of what I've been doing. And when you come, you'll probably say that you want to launch a new instance. So you'll click on Launch New Instance. And the first thing you'll be asked to do is search for an image. So an operating system that has software you like. If I search by topic like RNA-seq, I will return images that are tagged. So here's something that's tagged. It's got GATK toolkit, IJV, BWA, bowtie, etc. If that's what I was looking for, I could click on that. Maybe get a little bit more detailed, but then I could say, all right, that looks good, and press launch. And then I could select, in this case, you'll have the operation of the Rana Cloud, what size you need. Not every size available every second, but we do have quite a bit of capacity. And you'll see what your allocation is. In this case, this is the place in the CyVerse universe where you do see that there are limitations. So everyone has a monthly allocation. If you need more than that, you can request more, but by and large, you have a set initial allocation which will exhaust itself if you use it and then be refreshed every month. Now, if I was ready to launch this, then I click launch, but I'm not going to do that because I already have one running. But once you click launch, in about 10 to 15 minutes, it'll be available for you. You'll get an email and you can use it, and it'll look something like this. So let me go back to my projects where I have one running. And there I see I have this Workshop Cloud instance. It's active, it's got an IP address, I'm ready to connect to it. So when I click on it, I get a little bit more details about my instance. And if I want to, it's really easy to access it. So if I want to access the shell, I can click on Open Web Shell, and it's going to open as if I was at the terminal, accessing it through the web. If I want to see what files and folders are around, if I want to ask any questions about my user permissions, etc., I really am logged in. My CyVerse credentials work, and I'm also the sudo user, so I've got instant access to this virtual machine. I think this had BWA installed. Oh, it doesn't have installed on this one. This is my machine, so I forget all of the things that are installed on it. But in any case, I could run any or install anything I'd like. This machine also happens to have a desktop, so if I clicked on Open Web Desktop, I'd also similarly see Web Desktop installed, and I could run any applications or do anything that I would do at a computer. Okay. I can also connect to this without the web browser. So if I go back and get my IP address, if you're familiar with the command line, then you can SSH. So I'm going to clear that, and I'd say SSH my CyVerse username at that IP address. Yes to connect, and my CyVerse credentials. And now I'm connected, just as I was a moment ago on the web. If I have VNC Viewer, also paste that in, followed by :1, click to connect with my CyVerse credentials. And I'll see where it went, or it's taking its time. Hopefully it'll open, but then I would be able to view the desktop, which it seems slow for some reason. Just to sort of prove that these are relatively fungible, let me make that a little bit smaller. And let's try, since it wasn't liking me this day, looking at the desktop here. Oh, I think I know why. I've gotten that open. Let's see if this works again. That might be the reason why. No, it just doesn't like me, and that's a really old version of VNC Viewer. So I'll just go back and open the web desktop here. And if I did something on this connection, like make a directory, it would also be created simultaneously on the machine. So really, it's a fully formed, fully functional computer ready for me to use and install, do whatever type of things I need. The very first moment you start your CyVerse Atmosphere computer, it's not connected to the data store, so we don't copy all of your data from the data store in, but you'd copy over the files or folders that you need to analyze and use the existing software. There are also some other options that allow you to do that, the varying levels of sophistication, but the point is that you have this ready-to-order custom computer that's there for you to analyze data. To go back, there's a couple of brief things that you just need to show you, and then we'll wrap up. So looking back here, there's some other options that we have. If you have any kind of issue with the software, you can reboot or redeploy that machine. If you're not using it for a while, probably the best thing is to shelve it, and that saves things as they are. You won't burn down your allocation. When you're really done for the day, you click on stop and terminate, and you don't want to do that until you're really sure that you have, oops, I'm sorry, not stop, but actually delete, sorry. You don't want to do that unless you're sure you have copied all of the data off onto a more permanent location, such as the CyVerse data store, because we can't restore anything that you lose, so you have that option. But that's really it in terms of being able to launch and connect to virtual machines. So just to go back to the final slides that I have in terms of what's next, I want to take you to the CyVerse webpage, and I also want to give you an acknowledgement there of the CyVerse executive team across 3 of the sites. But going back to the CyVerse homepage, I just want you to know that here is a place to look for help and news about everything that's going on with CyVerse. So there's plenty of places to connect. You can see upcoming workshops, and we do personalized training workshops in person, where you can ask for virtual training. So there's things coming up in New Orleans and also in Colorado, a couple others that aren't on this schedule yet. But there's a whole wealth of information. So I encourage you to visit the website and see more about that. So with that said, I'm just going to give a few seconds to see if there are any additional questions. You have contact information for us, so you can always let us know if there's something else that we can do for you. But by and large, really, the platform is there for you to use. It's freely available for you and your collaborators, and there are really a ton of things to do. It just takes time to sort of get your head around it. We sometimes take 2 days to do a workshop on it. So in an hour, I hope I've given you just enough clues to see where you can get started. At the moment, I don't see any questions coming to me via the chat there, but you can follow up with us through the support mechanisms I've listed or through our contact information. And I ask that you stay on also for a brief survey that will be given to you post-webinar. We'll also contact you when this is posted to YouTube. So with that said, thank you very much for joining us, and we hope you get the most out of your new CyVerse account. Thank you.